Hi, I'm Norman. I raised a daughter, paid off a house, and thought I'd earned peace in my old age. But last week, my son-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, "Serve me dinner or pack your bags." He said I was too soft, too slow, too useless. They used my voice to raise money, while quietly cutting me out of my own legacy. They erased my name from the deed. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I smiled, then froze his bank account, and that was only the beginning. I've always believed that the tone of a family is set at the dinner table, and tonight that tone was sour. The casserole was lukewarm by the time I sat down. Veda had helped set the table, but Bart, he hadn't lifted a finger. Not that I expected him to, he rarely did. I served their plates first, as always, then mine last. Old habits, maybe, or just a way to keep the peace. The television hummed in the background from the living room, some political debate full of shouting and talking over each other. Fitting. Bart chewed loudly, half scrolling on his phone. Veda stayed quiet, eyes on her plate like it held all the answers she didn't want to hear from her husband. Then Bart dropped his fork, wiped his mouth, and looked straight at me. "You either serve me breakfast, lunch, and dinner like a real man should, or you can get out." I didn't flinch, didn't blink, just sipped my water and looked at the kitchen clock. The second hand made a full round before I smiled. What struck me wasn't the cruelty, it was the timing. He'd waited until dinner, until everyone had their mouths full and their guards down. That told me everything I needed to know. He didn't say it out of frustration. He said it because he could. I remember the first time Bart shook my hand. Back then, he wore that nervous groom smile, said "sir" a lot, and offered to fix the screen door without being asked. Funny how respect disappears when comfort moves in and plants its flag. Over the years, I've learned to smile when others expect me to fight. It throws them off. It buys me time. Across the table, Veda didn't say a word, but her eyes flickered. Guilt? Maybe. But she turned away too quickly for me to tell. Later, while they watched TV and pretended nothing happened, I washed the dishes in silence. Bart scrolled endlessly, smirking at something on his screen. Veda had disappeared upstairs. I was alone with the clatter of plates and a mind working faster than ever. Bart forgot who I was. I wasn't just some retiree freeloading in his house. I was the man who helped set up their mortgage, who still had access to the backup emails, the forgotten accounts, the passwords typed into a laptop while asking for help with the refinance. And I remembered everything. "You don't fight where you eat," I once told a colleague back in my audit days. "You prepare." I dried the last plate, turned off the light, and left the kitchen behind. In my room, the one that used to be Veda's nursery, I sat down at the old oak desk I'd brought from my house. It was scarred with time, but solid. Like me, I pulled out the black notebook, the one I hadn't opened in 5 years. Inside, names, numbers, notes, codes, some dated, some still useful. I never kept records for revenge, just for rainy days. And tonight, it was starting to drizzle. On the wall, a photo of my late wife smiled back at me, her eyes kind but steady. I used to talk to her more, but lately, I kept my words inside. "Looks like I'll have to teach him something," I whispered, quietly. Years ago, a manager at the firm once told me, "You're either useful or disposable." I was 36, 2 kids, mortgage, and pride I couldn't afford to show. That same night, I applied to 2 other companies. Walked out 2 weeks later without a word. Left my resignation letter in his top drawer, unsigned. That man and Bart, different haircuts, same sickness. People think history moves forward. I think it circles. It waits, then tests you again, just with different names. Bart gave his ultimatum. So did that manager. Back then, I found a door and walked through it. Now, I'd build the door myself. Lying in bed, the house quiet, I didn't feel tired. I felt wired, alive. In my head, I made a list. Check Bart's banking dependencies. Follow the patterns: gambling, subscriptions, hidden cash apps. Find the right moment to cut the rope and make him thank me while I do it. I opened my ledger, scribbled under the date. Sept. 5. The night they drew first blood with a smile. Before I turned off the light, I left one thing out in plain sight on the hallway table. A credit card bill. Past due, nothing flashy, just bait. Let's see if he takes it. The morning after that dinner didn't begin with shouting. That would have been too obvious. Bart was in a chipper mood, humming while pouring orange juice like nothing happened the night before. He joked about some meme he saw, read headlines aloud, and even winked at Veda across the table. She barely acknowledged him. Her eyes stayed on her toast, shoulders slightly curled, as if bracing for a wind that never came. I served coffee as usual, black, no sugar for him, with the smallest crack of civility in my smile. The silence between us wasn't peace. It was a slow fuse, burning quiet. Funny how some people show you who they are only when they believe you can't hit back. Bart had revealed himself now, not just arrogant, certain he was in control. That certainty was my invitation. I had no need for words. My answer would be written in numbers. Later that morning, while folding a stack of old utility bills, some real, some decoys, I slid one thin document into the middle of the pile. It was subtle, a printed notice from an old investment account, one I'd closed years ago, but the statement still looked active enough to spark curiosity. I placed it carelessly on the kitchen table, crooked, slightly visible under a flyer. Just the kind of oversight Bart wouldn't ignore. He found it an hour later, as I rinsed dishes nearby. "What's this?" he asked, holding it up with a grin too wide to be casual. "Oh, that?" I shrugged. "Just an old fund I forgot about. I like watching money grow. Habit from my working days." Bart gave a low whistle. "Didn't know you had stuff like this still kicking around." I didn't look up. "Well, I'm old, not broke." He laughed, but it wasn't the kind that meant joy. It was interest laced with intent. His eyes darted across the paper, probably calculating, estimating. Entitlement wears a certain look. It's subtle, but always there in the tilt of the head, the pacing of the questions. He asked if I needed help managing it. I smiled again. Same polite nothingness. Appreciate the offer, but I still know my way around a balance sheet. As he walked away, tucking the paper back too neatly into the pile, I wrote my next mental note. He's not just a bully, he's greedy. That makes him predictable. Numbers never lied to me. Not back when I helped small businesses survive IRS audits. Not when I spotted my own firm's misreporting years ago. And not now. I've worked with men like Bart, flashy, lazy, impulsive. They overspend and underthink. I started cataloging the usual faults. How often he transferred money between accounts, his PayPal logins, his crypto talk that didn't match actual investments. Everything he did screamed House of Cards. I opened my black notebook again. Page 1, weaknesses, digital dependency, mortgage cosigner, me. That alone gave me leverage. Veda's name on joint accounts, most of which I helped set up. I knew where the seams were because I stitched them myself. Lions don't growl at rabbits. They wait in the tall grass. I just needed to let Bart feel like he was winning. That afternoon, I tried something that used to come easy. I asked Veda to take a walk around the block. We used to do that when she was a teenager, usually after hard days. A quiet loop around the neighborhood used to unlock all kinds of things from her chest. But she looked down, shook her head. "Can't. I've got a Zoom call in 10. "Just for 10 minutes, I said softly. She avoided my eyes. "Things are complicated, Dad. You wouldn't understand." Her voice cracked, just a little. I didn't push. I could have, but what would have been the point? I walked alone. Around the corner, past the tall maples we planted when she was 7, back when scraped knees were the biggest concern in the world. I raised a fighter, I murmured to myself. Somewhere along the way, she buried her fists. At dinner, Bart brought it up again, thinking I should start investing. Might hit it big, you know. Maybe you could show me a few things, old man. Start with saving before spending, I said with a chuckle. He didn't like that. His lips tightened just enough for me to see it. He covered it quickly, but the ego was bruised. That was good. Veda sat between us. She wasn't eating much. Her eyes traced her fork like it was solving a puzzle. The silence between us wasn't accidental, it was learned, practiced. I listened more than I spoke, watching, recording. He thought I was slipping. That age made me soft. Let him believe that. That night, when the lights were off and the house had gone still, I sat at my desk again. In the notebook, I wrote, Day 2, subject believes he's smarter. Good. Keep feeding that. Then I placed a sticky note on my laptop. Arrogance is the enemy's first move. He thought he was in charge, but I'd already started pulling threads. I closed the guest room door softly behind me, locking the click into place. The darkness felt familiar, like an old coat I could still slip into. My leather folder sat on the desk, the one I brought from my old study, kept safe all these years. I flipped it open, careful not to rustle the pages too loudly. The framed photograph of my wife on the dresser caught my eye. Her gentle smile remained unchanged. So much has changed around it. I thumbed through decades of ledgers, tax forms, property notes, letters I never sent. The ink stains, margin scribbles, faded receipts, they were my history. Then I saw it. A folded page tucked between sheets. My name, a scanned signature, a property waiver. I froze. This wasn't misplaced. Someone planted it. I eased the paper open. The fine print shifted rights from me to another party. My signature dated years ago and a clause I barely read. My breath caught in my throat. Bart, or someone working for him, had hidden this in his files. Used my own pen against me. Back then I was persuaded. Just sign this, Dad. It protects Veda's future. I closed my eyes and felt the weight of that decision now used as a weapon. Old signatures become fill-in-the-blanks when people think no one cares. I could destroy it, I could leave it, but I would use it instead. I slid it under a stack of letters and made a clean copy. I carried the copy, tucked it into Bart's desk drawer, positioned so someone would find it. Let it look accidental. Let him think he'd outsmarted me. Later I heard the shuffle of drawers and Bart's voice. What is this? Footsteps on hardwood. I remained in the guest room pretending to read a magazine. I heard him mutter and then his voice. Your file must have merged it with mine. Old systems glitch. Tension filled the hallway. I didn't answer. Silence was my ally. I heard Veda's soft intake of breath. I imagined her eyes flitting between us. I remember signing a land parcel years ago, sacrificing so Veda could have stability. I never thought that sacrifice would turn into a trap. I knew the weak points of Bart's finances. I began tracking his micro-users, small credit transfers, gift cards, odd PayPal entries. At dinner, Bart boasted, "One day your mortgage won't mention me." He meant he would cut me out. I nodded politely. Inwardly, I cataloged every syllable. Veda sat between us. She avoided my gaze. Guilt flickered in her eyes. I let it sit there, like a weight she couldn't carry forever. Night came. I retrieved the original waiver from Bart's drawer, slipped it under the Bible placed unevenly in his bedside stand. I turned off my light and whispered into darkness. Tomorrow, I'll show him the signature belongs to me. The smell of rosemary focaccia and warmed goat cheese drifted through the air as I stepped into the living room. Light jazz played over the speakers, the kind of music that sounds expensive but means nothing. Veda was arranging flowers on the mantel, focused, avoiding my gaze. I took a slow walk around the space. Every photo was curated. Their wedding, her awards, family trips with Bart's parents. But nothing of the old house, nothing of me. A frame that used to hold a picture of us, the three of us when she was 10, was gone, replaced with a modern print of some lake, probably bought in a rush, probably meant to erase. I stood still and thought, you don't need to tear someone down to disappear them. Just leave them out of the story. Outside on the terrace, Bart was already laughing too loud. He slapped a neighbor's back and tossed his head like he belonged on a billboard. I stood behind the glass, half seen, wholly dismissed. The guests came in waves. Neighbors, old co-workers, someone who used to be Veda's boss. I was offered a chair near the front, close to the fireplace, but not a single person introduced me. I might as well have been another houseplant. Bart welcomed everyone with that voice he saves for when people are watching. We're so glad you're here. This celebration is all about Veda's vision, her leadership, her brilliance. He gestured to the newly framed campaign poster on the wall, her latest ad series. I had helped her brainstorm the initial concepts years ago, but you wouldn't know it tonight. No mention of who funded the original mortgage on this house. No nod to the man who paid off her first car so she could drive to college internships. Just smiles and praise and a shallow clap. Veda gave a polite nod, barely smiling. Her eyes caught mine. There was something there. Embarrassment, a wince. She turned away before I could know for sure. Then Bart raised his glass. Let's toast to those who really built this, our friends, our clients, our team, and of course, Veda. People clapped. Veda blinked fast, her mouth tight. I sat perfectly still. Let the noise wash past me. The loudest voices often break first. When the clapping died down, I stood up. Bart was mid-sip, caught off guard. I said calmly, "This house was once mine too." Murmurs rippled. One guest tilted their head. Bart froze. "Excuse me?" someone asked. I didn't raise my voice. Just looked around and said, "I helped build this home. I'm not asking for applause, just making sure my name isn't buried under the rug with the dust." I sat down again. Nobody moved for a long few seconds. No one clapped. No one laughed. Bart's face stiffened, his jaw tight. Veda stared at her lap. That silence, it echoed longer than his toast. After the gathering wound down and people made their polite excuses, Veda found me in the hallway. She looked tired and younger somehow. Like the little girl I used to tuck in after spelling tests. "Dad," she whispered. "I'm sorry. He said you'd twist things. That if you got involved again, it'd all fall apart." I looked at her and said, "I'm not trying to tear anything down. I just won't sit quiet while being painted out of the picture." She blinked fast. "Things are complicated. They don't have to be dishonest, too," I replied. She nodded slowly and walked off. I went back to my guest room, closed the door, sat on the bed, and felt the walls shift, like a foundation beginning to crack. Later that night, after the house had gone quiet, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Check your mailbox. Truth hides where people file things." I stared at the screen, heart beating slower but harder. I awoke to the soft creak of the mailbox lid, an old habit from mornings long past. When I stepped outside in slippers, the sun still lazy in the sky, I saw an unremarkable brown envelope nestled between grocery coupons on the doorstep. No return address. Inside was a printed email thread. Bart roasting me to a friend. "Dead weight," he typed. And this line, "He doesn't even know the house was refinanced in my name last month." My chest seized. My hand shook with a memory of sacrifice. I murmured, "They whisper when they think you're deaf." I folded the page, tucked it into my shirt, and resolved, warn first, strike later. Back inside, I retreated to my guest room. My notebook lay waiting. Calmly, I penned a letter, firm but controlled. I told him I knew about the refinance and asked for a face-to-face meeting to restore trust before any more damage. I wrote, I won't fight you, Bart. But I won't disappear either. I signed Norman Elbridge, not Dad. I folded it carefully, placed it under a globe-shaped paperweight on his desk. The world is small when pride drives the wheel, I whispered. Dinner arrived quietly. Bart served first, nodded at me, then carried my letter into the kitchen. I stayed seated, watching. Moments later, I heard him rip paper. The trash can swallowed the scraps. You want to talk like a man? Then act like one. But you're not the alpha, he said, loud enough to sting. Veda gasped. I held my fork halfway to my mouth. In my head, fire roared. On my face, I managed a faint smile. Noted, I uttered. Later, Veda knocked softly. Her voice cracked, eyes wet. Dad, why do you let him treat you like that? She asked as though she feared the answer. I told her about the mailbox email, the letter I left, the silence I've held for her sake. She confessed she'd seen odd statements, hidden drafts, and hoped it would pass. Hope is a beautiful hostage, I said. It keeps people staying when the fire is already burning. She asked what I intended. I said, I'm going to make him regret ripping that letter. In the late hours, I sat at my laptop, documents open. I reviewed the refinance contract, the fine print. There it was, a clause requiring any major asset change to be disclosed to original title holders. That clause was my string. I drafted an email to my old attorney. Coffee next Thursday, but I didn't send it. It stayed as a draft, unsigned. Before closing the laptop, I looked again at the shredded letter in the kitchen trash. I whispered to myself, that wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. Dinner unfolded in stiff silence. Voices clinked over wine glasses, but the warmth had fled the room. Bart, leaning into the mic he'd set up for toasts earlier, was thanking someone. Helen, your referral grew the firm 20%, with pride in his gaze. Laughter, applause, small talk swirled. I sat at the table, a ghost among guests. Then a voice cut through. Mr. Wexford, what's your role here? An investor he'd invited. The room froze. Veda's face went pale. Bart laughed too loud, repositioned the spotlight. Oh, he's just here for moral support, he said, dismissive. My heart clenched, but I nodded, sipped water. Inside, I burned with disbelief. They asked because they forgot I ever existed. After dinner, Bart called me to the home office under the guise of a clerical error. I walked down the hallway, the carpet muffling my steps. He stood behind a desk, printed pages before us. He pushed one across. My name was gone, removed from the deed. He said, cool. Don't worry. We're just streamlining our partnership. Betrayal tasted like cheap scotch. I responded quietly, this is reversible. He shrugged. Veda lingered by the door, tears glinting in her eyes. I returned to my guest room and paced. I replayed signing joint documents years ago, believing trust would last forever. I thought of the day I insisted on securing Veda's college fund and trust, signing guarantees willingly. Now they treated that guarantee like an afterthought. I revisited the clause from the refinance document. My faint hope. My resolve hardened. They were going to remember I left fingerprints long after ink fades. Later, Bart found me near the study. He tossed a casual greeting. Everything sorted. I turned, met his eyes. Sorted for whom? I asked. He chuckled, deflecting. It's business. Nothing personal. I lowered my voice. When a knife is wielded by family, it's always personal. A guest wandered by. The room shrank. Veda called me gently after, through the door. Dad, I asked him to leave it. He said you wouldn't back off. Her tone trembled. She revealed she knew Bart drafted documents. I told her forgiveness is not absence of boundaries. She brushed tears. She asked whether we should fight or step away. I responded, we fight where truth holds weight. Before sleep, my phone buzzed. A notification. Mail delivery. The deed had been returned. Refused. My pulse spiked. They tried to erase me. They failed. Bart's soiree had all the trimmings. Soft lights, clinking glasses, polite laughter stretching across the room. He stood by his new framed portrait of the house, glass gleaming, plaque beneath, a tribute to our partnership, names of donors etched around the border. Bart's was largest, mine, absent. A guest murmured, "What a beautiful gesture. You two built something strong." I felt the room tilt. Veda's jaw clenched. I stayed seated, heart thudding. They pretend to build while stealing foundations. My next move was already forming, just beneath my calm. Then he dimmed the lights and cued the video. Clips of me at a gala, smiling, speaking into a microphone. "I will support my family fully." I recognized the cadence, but the lines had been repurposed. Guests applauded. I froze. Bart looked at me and winked. Veda's face drained. They turned my youth into their PR. I stood. "That voice wasn't meant for this stage," I said. Murmurs rippled. Bart dismissed me with a smirk. But the lie was exposed. Outside, many guests drifted to the backyard. Bart continued boasting, his legacy, his vision. I followed quietly, listening. He called me sentimental, said he had inherited nothing but had built everything from nothing. "Dad was always too sentimental," he said offhand. I walked into his trail. "Your sentiment is built on shadows," I said. Bart stopped. I drew nearer. "You're healing yourself with theft." He stepped toward me. I held my ground. The crowd stilled. This was my moment, to show strength. Veda emerged between us. She said, "Stop this, Bart." Her voice cracked. She said she had been misled, believed the narrative. Then to me, "I wanted to protect, but I lost myself." I answered, "You never lose what you never trade." Bart tried to interject. She glanced at me, regret clear. The balance shifted. I said nothing more. Silence can sharpen the guillotine. I watched him speak, took in every syllable. I slipped away into the house. Inside, I retrieved the clause from the refinance file I discovered earlier. I whispered to myself, "They built walls of silence. Tomorrow, I'll break them." Before sleep, I set my recorder to capture Bart's signature on the deed. I listened as the hour ticked. He thinks he staged the narrative. Tomorrow, I'll rewrite it. The house was still humming with leftover chatter and clinking glasses when I slipped into Bart's office. I told a lingering guest I'd forgotten my phone. They didn't ask further. The safe sat behind the bookshelf, third panel from the right. Bart never changed the code. Birth year and ego usually walk hand in hand. Inside, I found what I came for. Contracts rewritten, signatures duplicated. A folder labeled Asset Realignment sat bold in red. I scanned pages quickly, phone camera snapping each one. Notes scribbled beside my name, lines crossing me out, language just vague enough to slip past most, but not me. Clauses shifted without spousal consent. I closed the safe, left everything as it was, except for that red folder. That one I took with me. They thought my silence made me powerless, but I kept tools in my shadow. Back in the guest room, I played the doctored video again, but this time, side by side with the original footage I'd kept stored away for years. My own archive. The difference was sharp. My voice, intact in tone, had been cut, reshuffled, repurposed, like someone tearing apart a letter to use the pieces for ransom. I brought it to Veda, just her and me. She sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes locked on the screen. At first quiet, then her hand went to her mouth. "He spliced it," she said almost in a whisper. "He used your words to write his story." I nodded. "They built their narrative on my memory. I'm putting it back in context." She exhaled deeply. "I want to tell the truth, with you." Her voice steadied. We sat there in that room of quiet betrayals, gathering resolve like breath before a storm. Later, I asked Bart to gather everyone again, said I wanted to make amends. He looked suspicious, but pride is a blindfold. He agreed. In the living room, I stood where he'd stood. I clicked play. First his version, then mine. The room shifted. This, I said, pointing to the projection, was played to gain your praise, but what you just heard was taken from a speech about rebuilding my wife's medical foundation, not about this house, not about Bart. Bart's face twitched. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. You played them with my voice, I said, calm. Now I play back your lies. I set the red folder on the coffee table. Pages flipped open, revealing contracts, clause notes, the deed, mine reinstated. Bank letter, confirming it. My name back where it belonged. Veda stood next to me, faced the room. I believe the story he told me, she said. But now I see how much was edited, off the page and inside our home. The room murmured. Bart didn't speak. His face turned a shade I hadn't seen since he was 8 and caught stealing from his teacher's drawer. I didn't gloat. This wasn't victory. It was restoration. When the guests left, the house returned to a different kind of silence. Bart shut himself in his study. No slamming, just retreat. I stood in the kitchen, hands resting on the edge of the counter. Same house, same walls. But the weight had shifted. Justice doesn't roar. It settles in your bones, like a truth that's finally stopped hiding. Veda came in quietly, didn't say a word, just placed her hand on mine. We stood that way for a while. I didn't need her apology. She didn't need to offer it. Some moments speak louder with silence. In my guest room, I sat at the desk and opened my laptop, attached the documents, labeled everything clearly, sent the email to the title company, the bank, the registry. But instead of hitting send, I set it to auto-send at 6 o'clock a.m. He'd still be asleep. They wanted me gone from the paper, I whispered. Now I'll be printed in ink they can't erase. I turned off the light, lay back, and for the first time in months, sleep didn't feel like surrender. It felt like peace. A buzz woke me in the early dark. I checked my phone. Document filed, name reinstated, bank confirms. I didn't say a word, but I smiled, not wide, just enough to feel my own presence again. I woke at dawn to a message blinking on my phone. Let's talk. I rose, went to the porch where morning's chill still held dew on the grass. Bart stood there, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. He looked nervous, smoke in his eyes, regret in his posture. I took 1 cup but didn't drink. He began apologies, vague and shaky. You want forgiveness for the consequences, not for the actions, I said. He faltered. I let him speak, measured words, promises of change, but I withheld closure. My peace wasn't something he could grant. Sometimes dignity is choosing not to slam the door, but walking past it. Inside the house, I walked the rooms one last time. Living room, hallways, kitchen, memories everywhere. Frames, old letters, half-finished projects. None of it felt like mine any longer. I packed 2 boxes, clothes, letter collections, books. Veda watched, tears sliding down her cheeks. You're still my dad, always, she said softly. I paused. I handed her keys. I offered the video copy. Do what's right with it. Her fingers trembled. I told her, be the woman who doesn't need my protection, but keeps her integrity. She nodded, head bowed, then looked up. I left. Later, I sat in a quiet corner of the public library. I asked to use the community printer. The letter titled, Legacy Isn't Money, It's Memory, spread across the page. I wrote, your last name doesn't make you a man, your actions do. I told of betrayal and love, forgiveness without weakness, filed it under Personal Memoirs, Norman. I thought, what I lost in silence, I now echo through pages. Breakfast next. I slipped into a small diner downtown. Seated at a counter, the waitress looked at me kindly. "You look lighter today." I smiled. "Some weights you carry a lifetime. One morning, they just stop needing you." I left a generous tip, patted the chair I'd sat in. Outside, a kid on a bike rolled by. He called, "Nice day, sir." I nodded. "It really is," I whispered. Late afternoon, I visited the bank, updating my mailing address, opening a trust in my name, no strings. Memo, for wisdom, not wealth. Then I walked down the street to the community center, asked about volunteering for reading storytelling. A child ran up. "Are you the man from the video?" I knelt, looked at him. "Yes. But more importantly, I'm the man after it." Back home, I placed the final key on the old family table, the table built when Veda was little. I stood, breathing in the quiet of an empty house, a voiceover in my mind. When the house you built becomes a battlefield, it's okay to build another one, just more peaceful this time. The story doesn't end. It echoes.